I love this show so much. One,
Can't you
I
count the ways?
I am drawn to gritty realism. As people know, I'm not just a podcaster. I'm also a professional social worker. I have always been drawn to substance abuse. Um, Not doing the substance abuse, like I've been, providing substance abuse
Just can't
counseling.
escape. And he hates Bubs. I don't know what the problem is.
Um, anyway, now I've always been drawn to the drug culture, either as somebody providing assistance, counseling, that sort of thing. A lot of my research papers when I was in grad school was about harm reduction and the effects of drug. What would be the social effects of drug legalization as opposed to continued criminalization of substance abuse. I like drugs, and I also a little bit about my history. From the ages of like birth to 12, I lived in an all black neighborhood. I lived in a black neighborhood that had its fair share of drugs. So you could see like so this is Uniondale, New York, just in the same city that hosts the Nassau. I don't know what it's called now, but it was the Nassau Coliseum when I lived there. It's where the Islanders play. Saw a lot of professional wrestling back in the day there.
Mhm.
And it was a halfway decent neighborhood, but it also had its fair share of drugs. And so I remember walking to school and there were crack vials in the street and heroin vials and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah, there were parks I was not allowed to go to because they were active drug dens. I went anyway because I was a dick as a child, just as an adult. When I could go, I anytime I was like I'm going out and play with my friends. Well, don't go to Smith Street Park. There's drug dealers there. I'm like, I'm going anyway.
You subjected yourself to that and you did not become a user or anything like that. So that's
I mean, I was in elementary school.
Did you tell I was going to say, well, that don't matter. Did you tell your parents, "Hey, look, I went and nothing ever happened to me.
Everything
was
would
fine."
beat me if I did.
Oh boy.
But yeah, so there's something about the African American culture that is also, just a part of who I am, a part of my personality, a part of my soul. And so between my natural sort of attraction to the drug culture and the drug culture and my natural attraction to elements of the African American culture. Plus, I've always been a fan of like police dramas, and detective stories, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
probably was a big fan of like Batman as a kid. And I've said this time and time again. If I'm not talking about The Wire, I'm talking about Batman. That I was drawn to Batman because before he became completely written to appease the fanboys and the incels and the neckbeards, Batman was a detective, in a fancy costume, not a ninja. He would become a ninja later. But when I was reading Batman comics as a kid, he was more of like a figure it out kind of a guy. And that's what I like.
Yeah.
So between detective elements, drugs, and black folk, I remember, and I've told this story before, but I remember catching an episode of The Wire, just flipping through channels. And, we talk about inclusion, we talk about casting, and you generally don't see a lot of, especially like middle-aged black men all on camera at the same time. So when I saw a scene of The Wire as I was flipping through HBO, and I saw, I think it was like Lance Reddick, I can't remember the actor who plays the police commissioner, but
got them all right here.
Yeah,
Frankie
Faison. Yeah.
Yep.
I remember, like I was like, holy cow! Like, why are all these like middle-aged black men all on the screen at the same time? Did we break a law somewhere? Like, what happened here? And I was immediately like hooked. Like, what are they doing? What are they talking about? I remember my first watch of The Wire. I couldn't understand half of what they were talking about because I didn't watch it from the beginning. I watched it from whatever episode I happened to have caught, and there's so much minutia in the show, in the language, that I was drawn to it. But I was drawn to it like one would watch a foreign film. Like, I don't know what you're saying. It's all in French.
Right.
but I'm weirdly interested, and I'm going to keep watching this and try to figure out what's happening in the show. And a few episodes in, I was hooked, and I had to go back and watch it from the beginning. without being silly, I can honestly say I really do feel like The Wire is the best written show in the history of television. And not just because of the reasons that I mentioned, but because of the things that it talks about, the way in which it talks about it. Some people have described The Wire as being too real, being too sad. Like,
did they see the corner?
Yeah, really. The tacit recognition. Well, I think by the time you get to the end of The Wire, it's competitive with the corner. And we'll get there in 4 months. But the tacit recognition that, you know, most people who are not directly living in filth and squalor look at The Wire and go, this is not why I watch television. This is too real. This makes me feel too bad. But that's the thing that drew me to it. You know, I like that. I like this reflection of the sadness and
gritty realism,
tragedy of American life.
Yeah,
I love it. I really do. I don't know what kind of person that makes me, but I just love the shit out of it. I love the language. I love the way that the characters talk to each other. I love the fact that it editorializes so many different issues in modern urban life. It years before Black Lives Matter and defund the police and all of that, this show was talking about the institutional racism in the police force and the militarization and how it dehumanizes the very people that they're sworn to protect. I love the fact that it talked about, you know, something that Freakonomics also brought up, that, you know, not every drug dealer is a millionaire. A lot of them are just, you know, making just enough money for sandwiches and sodas.
Yeah,
and paints people that are often judged, ignored, treated harshly as sympathetic characters. You know, nobody in The Wire is innocent on either side.
Right.
Nobody in The Wire is all bad or all good. It treats the entire thing with a humanity I don't think that is often seen in American fiction, on television.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why I hold it in such high esteem. So let's talk a little bit about what The Wire actually is. Essentially, the setup to The Wire is we have a detective who has become detached from what he's doing. He's frustrated, and he watches a member of the drug dealing organization, the Barksdale organization, essentially get away with murder. And he makes a point of saying that, you know, he's a homicide detective. This is McNulty.
Yep.
He's a homicide detective who he's sort of at the end of his rope, and he just sort of sees the futility of what they're doing. You know, it's just like, solve a murder, another murder happens. Solve a murder, another murder happens. It just feels like he's shoveling shit against the tide. And he thinks, like, you know, if we could just shut down the Barksdale drug organization, we could save lives.
Yeah, you make an impact.
Yeah, he becomes a crusader. And he has a friendly ear in Judge Phelan, who then puts pressure on Police Commissioner Burrell to say, hey, put a detail together. Let's do something about this Barksdale organization. And there's reticence and resistance to doing so, because that's just not how things are done. You know? And so
that's on the surface.
Yeah,
there's a lot of other stuff they start to find out later that there's underneath because of that too.
Over the course of 13, why is it called The Wire? Because it's about how it is an editorialization about the militarization of policing and the futility of it all, and that there is a better way, but a better way is not as sexy and exciting as, you know, one would hope or one would believe. It is in fact a lot of sitting around, getting intel on your targets, collecting said intel, getting warrants, and bringing people in with enough probable cause that you'll win a trial if necessary.
Right. The tagline that I loved seeing when I was going through some of the images online was, you know, it had the poster and it said The Wire, then below it said, listen carefully.
Right.
And it's all about like them trying to get that intelligence in order to put that case together, but they run into so much red tape. Just you think of it, hey, we could put these
these drug
dealers right to jail.
Have you talked to people in your have you talked to people in your family who's like, the government's spying on us? There's drones everywhere. Like
they fly over. They
they
if I
really
remember
do.
correctly.
But you ever talk to just idiots who are like, oh my god, the government's listening in on our phone calls? Like, and what The Wire does is it basically says, like, you know how hard it is to do that. We are so protected. We're so protected by constitutional rights that it is nigh impossible for any kind of policing organization to truly spy on you without sufficient cause. And even, so just as an example, Lester Freeman says at one point, in order for us to listen to a call and use it as evidence, somebody has to be watching when that person uses the phone.
Right. If it's exactly. And I think, they got the whole non-pertinent rule. You got to listen to it for like, and then you turn it off if it's after like 45 seconds or something like that if it's not pertinent. So yeah, there's all this stuff that's set in place.
And it's all to protect your privacy. It's all to protect you. And yet because we're such a paranoid and idiotic culture.
Well,
like, I think, oh my god, like the government's spying on us. It's like, you have no idea. And that's one of the things I love about the show.
One of the things, granted, okay, yeah, laws are laws, but one of the things you can definitely say nowadays is that this was in 2002.
Right.
All right. We are now 20 years past that. The amount of technology has absolutely increased. It's way easier to do what they were trying to do back then. But again, there are laws in place to protect all that, but still a lot of things have changed too. And
we joke about like when we do these podcasts, the government's listening on like your Amazon.
You're on the list now. Yeah. You mention one word of something.
Right. And we joke about it. But again, what The Wire talks about is the minutia of having to do all of those things, and it's not easy. Right. It talks about the how to get probable cause and the importance of it versus the cops that just feel like this is an opportunity to beat the shit out of people in your neighborhood, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say the one thing that stood out to me, I think it's like right in the first bit of these few episodes, the distinguished difference between the technology that the state level has versus the federal government has, because McNulty has a friend that's I think he's in the FBI.
He's in the FBI.
Yeah. And they walk in on this fancy thing, this fancy wire that they've got going on, all this technology, and they're looking around. They're like, they're still doing things by paper. They hardly have a computer that they can use on this state level of things. So that's another thing that they kind of see, is that the state only has so much money to allocate towards doing something like this.
Right. It's not even
the federal government has a bigger pocket.
City of Baltimore, they're on the city budget.
Oh, that's right. The city. Yeah. So, I mean, it just probably, progressively goes down.
There's a line that Burrell says later on, we're all over the place, but there's a line that Burrell says in the show where he's like, your wire is costing me X amount of millions of dollars a day or some like crazy figure. Like, there is this. There's a lot of, like, Forrester, I think, says it too, where he's like, I'm not risking my career for something I don't care about. I'm paraphrasing. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of, we get by doing X. So all we're going to do is X. But is X effective? That's immaterial. It's accepted. There's an inertia that is talked about in The Wire about policing. And I just love it to death. So just to kind of wrap up this little first bit of our discussion here, Judge Phelan asks Burrell to set up a detail. The detail is like humps and fuck ups because they don't really want to do this. They want to do just enough to satisfy the judge so he'll go away.
Right.
There's no interest in actually bringing down this organization. So it's like, they're going to put just enough talent and interest in getting a few low-level drug dealers and call it a day, which is not what McNulty wants.
Right. They've been told to do it, so they're going to do it, but they're going to do it in the absolute worst way possible.
With low effort at best.
Right.
And McNulty is willing to trash his own career and reputation to fight with everybody to move this forward, because he believes with religious zealotry that if he could only bring down the Barksdale organization, things will get better. And it's funny because the great tragedy of The Wire is nothing makes anything better. We'll get to it with season 2, but my friend Chuck had the funniest line when we were watching it, because at the end of season 2, a truck opens up and drugs go one way and girls go another. And he looks at me and he goes, "So the moral of this story is nothing stops drugs and bitches." Or drugs and whores. That's what it was. Nothing stops drugs and whores. And how that is the great tragedy that The Wire speaks to.
Right.
So they realize that they're not going to, over the course of the 13 episodes, the detail becomes more invested in what they're doing. They believe in the cause. The cause moves them forward. And, everybody is hurt by this. Kima gets shot, like legitimately shot, and is out of commission there for a while. McNulty is demoted and put on the Harbor Patrol. Lance Reddick, who plays
Lieutenant
Daniels, is like sent to property, I think. Like he gets he gets passed over for promotion, like shoved someplace he doesn't need to be. Lester Freeman, he ends up being taken out of the pawn shop unit and put into homicide, taking McNulty's place. Another guy who was initially sent in as kind of a spy from the homicide unit, who ends up not doing what is asked of him. He gets demoted to the paddy wagon.
He's out patrolling the streets.
Yep. Which funny, because you'll catch up with him in like a later season. And I think it's season 3 when you find out he's on the paddy wagon. He's like, "This is the best gig ever. I'm still paid as a homicide detective, and all I do is drive the van." It's great. I love that.
And that's another thing that this show shines a light on. It's like, these people, there's a lot of personal vendettas, especially from the top down.
How little of this has to do with effective policing and more of covering one's own ass.
Right. Or making sure you get one over on that guy because he did something to you.
Well, that's another thing that happens is, so they get The Wire because they need the intel. The intel is what gives them the higher ups, and that's who they're after. That's the whole show. But at one point, and this is so funny because Lester gets really invested in what they're doing, and he's like, "Okay, now we need to start following the money." And they say the line a few times throughout the course of 13 episodes. If you follow the drugs, you get drug dealers. You follow the money, you don't know who you're going to get. And there's a whole sequence of events that has to do with shit. State senator.
Which he did not say at all this season, I don't think.
No, I don't think
he did not. He showed up one episode, maybe 2, but he did not drop the shit.
Because Day-Day's money got took. State senator, shit. What's Isaiah Whitlock's character's name?
Oh, I don't have it in front of me. I thought I had all of them, but not that guy. All you have to do is say shit. Everybody's going to
everyone knows who he is. But they start following the money, and that's how they end up on Day-Day, and Day-Day's got drug money in his car, but because he's connected to Burrell, they have to give the money back, and there's no charge, and there's no nothing. There's all and what they realize is that the Barksdale organization is like sending money to politicians. They're donating for favor and a variety of things. And there's I think there's a sequence where like politicians are giving the money back, and
they're like, just to let you know, we are returning all this money to these contributors.
And there's Burrell right in the middle of all this going, "I just asked you to arrest some drug dealers. I didn't ask for any of this." And they don't want it,
because then at that point it becomes a big deal, which probably means they're going to have to put more work in on this and probably make more enemies if that's the case, because I guarantee you Deputy Commissioner Burrell does not want his he's all about the politics
with Isaiah Whitlock and Lance Reddick when they're at opposite table, and they're like, "This stupid motherfucker."
Right.
You better Burrell, you better tell this motherfucker what time it is. It's like, yikes.
And it's about that. Yeah. It's about that time that Daniels finally is just like, he's finally fed up with the bullshit, because they've been trying to ride his ass about falling in line, and he's pissed off about having the detail. And finally, he feels like they're making a difference. And now we got the senator coming in.
Right.
And he's just like, well, whatever, man. If you haven't done anything, you ain't got anything to worry about.
I'm gonna wrap up the first half of this just by saying that they, it eventually pays off. They get almost everybody. The only one so along the way, and this is the second part of the story, and I really have to address this, and then I'm gonna turn it over to you for your notes and guidance, because we'll be here for another 6 hours if you let me talk. So I
took a nap before. We're good.
So we've been talking for this first half an hour really about the policing side of it, but we would be neglectful and derelict if we did not talk about the Barksdale organization. And the heart and soul of this show is D'Angelo. So when we meet D'Angelo, he allegedly shot a guy, and he's on trial, and that's what prompts this whole thing, is that the witness backs up on their story. He ends up getting not guilty. And that's what sends McNulty over the edge to go to Phelan and be like, what the fuck with all this? But you follow D'Angelo's story, and D'Angelo's caught between this place of, is this legacy of drug dealing my entire identity, or do I get to be my own man? And that's what he's struggling with. Also, is he hard enough? Is he does he have what it takes to be an effective leader in a drug organization, or is his heart too big? Is he too soft? And these are the things he runs up against. So like, he gets demoted within like the first episode or two after shooting somebody and costing them money to get him out of prison. And he gets demoted from the whatever apartment buildings they were dealing with to the projects. And that's where you meet Michael B. Jordan's character, Wallace. Where's Wallace? You meet Bodie.
Tell me, where's Wallace, motherfucker?
Bodie, who was Kenny from Oz, who's great in this. You meet Poot, and through that story, you're not only learning about how just caught and torn to pieces D'Angelo is, but you're also kind of shown in this particular instance in 2002 Baltimore how drugs are dealt. And it's not just a guy standing on the street corner going, want drugs. There's like a whole thing to it. They talk about you can't take the money and hand the drugs over, then you're implicated that way if someone's taking pictures, that sort of thing. So there's like a whole, so you have this like Lord of the Flies-esque setting of derelict and poor children in a projects hired as lookouts and dealers and runners to all to sell heroin and crack to the locals who are lining up for blocks to get it. There's a really great little sequence where they're like giving away tasters. They're giving away free drugs so that people will come back to buy more drugs.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And just the utter abuse. Like, so I jokingly talked about Bubbles and how I don't care about his story.
Poor Bubs. Poor Bubs.
But Bubs and Johnny gets beat to shit.
Oh man, does he ever?
They're counterfeiting bills, and they use it to try to buy drugs, and they fuck up, and Johnny gets his ass beat. And that's what prompts Bubs to start snitching for the police, and that's what really gets the ball rolling for the investigation. But going back to Johnny and that scene with the tasters, just how abusive and dehumanizing the drug dealers are to the drug users.
Oh yeah.
And then now contrast that scene with the sequence where Carver and dipshit McGee, Presbalewski, yeah, show up to the high rises to just bully people, and Presbalewski hits a kid in the eye.
Right, fucks him up.
His line, by the way, later on is like, "Motherfucker trying to pit me for a Reese cup."
Yeah,
Shakespeare, people. Shakespeare.
That's right.
So good. It's just Baltimore is presented on a city about to go over the edge. and everyone's just tearing each other down. Drug dealers are tearing down the drug users. The drug users are tearing themselves down. The police are tearing down the drug dealers. Everyone, and then the politicians and the higher ups are tearing down the cops. Like everyone's just ripping each other to shreds.
Right.
And for what? Like to what end? For what purpose? And I think that is one of the great tragedies of the show is there is none. It's just the state of where we are right now, or at least where we were in 2002. So we meet Stringer Bell, and he's sort of the right-hand man to Avon Barksdale. Avon Barksdale is the one with the connect. He's the guy at the top of the table. He's the
kingpin.
Yep, he's the one with who organizes everything. And then we meet Weebay, who's their like personal assassin, essentially. I can't remember if it's Sticky Fingers or the other guy from Onyx who plays Bird. And then I'll talk about this, and then I'm gonna turn it over to you. We have to talk about the man with the shotgun who robbed
Omar. Omar's
yes.
coming. Omar's coming.
So I remember like in a documentary about The Wire about how everyone wanted to be Omar until they saw him kissing a dude. He's so gay.
Oh boy.
Omar robs drug dealers, and to teach Omar a lesson, they kidnap his partner and boyfriend and torture him to death, which sets Omar up to give the cops intel, which again helps them take down members of the Barksdale organization, namely Bird, but Weebay as well is I think where that leads. So,
and I mean that sets Omar off too. I mean, it's not he's so upset that he's helping the police, which you wouldn't think that this person would do.
They initially approach him, and he's like, "I'm not going to stop you from doing what you're doing, but I'm not going to help either. That's just not how the game is played." Then they torture Brandon, and he was like, "Well, this is above and beyond what is called for in these types of things. Like, it's one thing to catch a bullet, that's how the game is played. It's a whole other thing to go out of your way to torture somebody. Like, no, you people are not honorable and must be taken to. The enemy of my enemy is my friend." It's a really interesting set of sequences where he's basically like, I can live with drug dealers, and the and the consternation and interactions that we have, the antagonism. I can live with the natural antagonism of me who robs drug dealers and drug dealers who will shoot back at me. What you did is so bad that it's beyond what is acceptable for me in my line of work, and now I must go to the cops to help bring you down because because even one man with a shotgun is not going to be enough.
It crossed that line.
Right. Omar is such a great poetic. By Michael K. White, who is no longer with us. He's also on Boardwalk Empire and a bunch of other things, but mostly known as playing Omar with a big scar across his face. Brilliant, just a brilliant character. Later on in, I think it's like season 4, Omar has such a reputation. He's such a named character that as he walks down the street, drug dealers just throwing drugs at him.
Yeah,
and he went to go get Cheerios from the corner store, and he comes back and he's got a new boyfriend at this point, and he puts the drugs on the table, and the guy goes, "They run out of Cheerios." There's nothing funny about The Corner, but there were some really funny parts to The Wire. But all right, Jesse.